Senator Scott Dibble is the chief author in the Senate of the medical marijuana legislation. He's here to talk a little bit about where he's going to go next with this proposal. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Julie.
Senator, before we get into what's next, why don't you explain what made you decide to actually champion this piece of legislation? It's been around for quite some time.
Yeah, this is an issue that I've been aware of for many, many years. Folks might know that a big part of my early work, my volunteerism and some of my activism and advocacy was around HIV and AIDS issues. And that's an issue that's been front and center and a major public health concern for Minnesotans since the late 80s. And even as far back as then, we knew that the only way a lot of people living with HIV/AIDS could get relief from some of the major symptoms wasn't available to them from any conventional medicine at all. Some of the nausea, some of the wasting, some of the headaches, a lot of the issues was through using marijuana. Unfortunately, folks are forced to break the law if they want to seek even the most modest form of relief that's available through that avenue. And so it's been a real focus and a key conversation for a lot of people around a lot of these kind of medical syndromes. And a number of other states have actually taken steps and moved in this direction. And the evidence, the strong medical evidence is mounting that this is a good route to take, safe and effective.
One of the arguments against this proposal is that it's not very tightly regulated. You've stated publicly that your bill is very tightly written. Do you think it's possible to make it tighter to try to get law enforcement on board with this, or do you think it's written the way it's written, it will stand?
Well, some of the arguments against have stemmed from other states' approach to the idea, and they haven't been tightly regulated, and that's been unfortunate. California is the poster child where medical dispensaries kind of cropping up everywhere with very little oversight, very little regulation, sky's the limit, very, very loose monitoring of who can get these prescriptions and for what and under what circumstances folks are getting these prescriptions. If someone were to actually read our bill, a lot of the criticism in Minnesota is coming from folks who actually haven't read our proposal. The regulations, the circumstances, the prescribing authority, all very, very tightly circumscribed. And folks who can get marijuana, where it can be dispensed, all of the controls are very, very tight.
Senator, in a December 30th interview with the Associated Press, Governor Mark Dayton encouraged proponents of medical marijuana to collaborate with state law enforcement agencies to move forward with any legislation. He said he would sign something that the law enforcement community can support. Do you think it's possible to get law enforcement to support this measure, or at least stand down?
Well, if any of their public statements as well as their private statements to me in the form of emails are any evidence, I think law enforcement is in kind of a lockstep, knee-jerk position of opposition. They have yet to actually read the bill and what it says, and so they make public statements that are just completely contrary to the actual provisions that we have. They make statements about who can get marijuana and that it's loosely regulated and et cetera, et cetera. And they've said clearly there's no point of your even bringing the language of the bill to our next meeting because we're opposed and we're going to remain opposed. So I respect the governor's position. Sure, let's go have a good faith conversation, negotiation with law enforcement. They're charged with enforcing the laws and making sure illegal drugs aren't getting out into the larger community. If we could in fact have a good faith conversation and negotiation with public safety, for whatever reason they're taking a position of absolute opposition with no ability to have any really open conversation about the provisions.
And so to that point, Governor Dayton, he traditionally has sided with law enforcement on this issue. However, very recently at a news conference, he requested that he talked about requesting an independent study on its use medically, as well as the potential implications to increased crime. So this is an independent study. How encouraged are you? Is this an encouraging sign that perhaps this issue is not dead in the water?
Well, I think it's an indication that he's opening his mind to the evidence, unlike law enforcement, which isn't open to the available evidence. I think we can show a couple of things. One is people are suffering right now, and they shouldn't wait. People have been suffering for a long time, and there are families now with little kids with these really, really serious seizure conditions who are being forced to live out of state, Colorado, Washington State, other places, California, so that their kids can find some relief. And so I'm encouraged that he's sensitive to the plight of people who are suffering today. And I'm encouraged that he's thinking about things like evidence around security and staying inside the bounds of the law and the efficacy of using medical marijuana. I don't think we need an actual independent study about what goes on inside the borders of Minnesota. There is a ton of evidence that this is a prudent course of action, and we want to continue to have that conversation with him.
And so moving forward in 2014, have you had conversations with lawmakers? Are you optimistic this can pass?
I think if lawmakers knew that the governor was going to sign this bill, we would get it passed overwhelmingly and we could get it to his desk in a matter of weeks. We've passed this bill before on a broadly bipartisan basis. We got it to Governor Pawlenty's desk. He vetoed it, unfortunately. He had made some indication at some point that he might not, but he vetoed it. You know, I think that absolutely. And if you go out and talk to the public overwhelmingly supports this idea as well. So politically, people stand on very solid ground. The policy is prudent. The values that underpin this, that we're providing relief to people who are suffering, are very, very strong. We just need some leadership, and we can get this done.
Okay, Senator Scott Dibble, thank you for sharing your thoughts on your proposal. We appreciate your
Great.
time.
Thanks, Julie.